Call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of Monday, August 19th, 2019. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mayor Berman?
Here.
Trustee Gabino?
Here.
Trustee Lowry?
Here.
Trustee Curtis? Here. Trustee Carroll?
Here.
Trustee Martinez?
Here.
Trustee Gately?
Here.
No audience comments. Any trustee comments? Our discussion, Animal Code, Mr. Toth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're redoing an entire chapter here, so I figure we just put a brief presentation together so the information is in front of us. Tonight we'll be talking about Title VI of the Municipal Code, which is the keeping of animals. Why we're proposing these? Well, we've had several residents approach us in the past regarding the number of animals, mainly keeping additional dogs on their property. There was also a newspaper article months back that for some reason discussed the number of dogs that could be kept in North Aurora in comparison to surrounding communities. We've been working with the resident also through code enforcement that is keeping fowl on the property, more specifically ducks, as emotional support animals, and they're kept with a professional's note, just to mention that. So it's one of the items that brought this forward. And also, too, when we started going through these provisions, mainly the number of animals, the keeping of farm animals, the emotional support animals, service animals, when we opened up the chapter, it became a slippery slope where we kind of had to go through several elements and reformat the entire code. So it took a little while. So we're basically bringing up to speed with current regulatory practices and current affairs, which is the service animal, also too impoundment provisions. We're working through this exercise with the village attorney and the police department. We met with the operations committee back in May to solicit feedback. At the time, the proposed amendments as written were supported by the operations committee. They felt that there was a need to support those residents in need of a service animal or emotional support animal, and so they weren't in conflict with the village ordinance, and namely having to deal with code enforcement. There was some detailed discussion revolving that issue, mainly how do we regulate these animals, how do we monitor them, creating a registration program, a licensing program was discussed, and also too the bulk of the conversation involved how many animals should be kept on a property. I'll get into some of the more details later in the conversation, but for those that weren't on the committee, those were the major items that were discussed. Also too, I did include a draft ordinance tonight for review as well, so if you got a chance to take a look at that. When we originally approached the operations committee, we had a certain amount of amendments that were proposed. Based on some of those discussions, we came up with a new set of amendments to the code, and these are the highlights to that. I'm just run through them quickly. We added definitions for emotional support animals and service animals, which you can see there. We changed the maximum limitation of animals to 4 in total. What I didn't mention earlier was that we allow 4 animals or 4 domesticated animals in North Aurora, but we don't allow for more than 3 of one species. Meaning you can have 3 cats, 1 dog, 3 dogs, 1 cat, 2 cats, 2 dogs, but you can't exceed more than 3 of one species. But what happened was when we opened the books and we started to go through this in regards to how we're going to regulate this and how we're going to integrate service and emotional support animals, it just made the most sense to put it at 4. And I'll give you some justification to show you what some of the other surrounding communities are doing as well. As part of that, the discussion at the operations committee was how do we integrate, we have on one hand just regular domesticated animals, and on the other hand we have emotional support animals and service animals, and how do we integrate that? What we came up with was basically that you can have a total of 4 animals. So even if it's a service animal and you have 4 service dogs per se, you can only have 4 of those. So that's sort of the limitation that we established for the household, and it keeps in line with surrounding communities as well. In that case, any other emotional support animals or service animals that exist as of right now would be essentially grandfathered into the code. As part of this also, farm animals would be allowed as a service or emotional support animal. It would be considered what we'll refer to in this presentation as an exempt animal, meaning that it's exempt as a prohibited animal, if you will. So allowing for farm animals as emotional support and service animals. as we talked about the operations committee and how do we keep track of these, well, you'll see in the draft ordinance that we created a registration system that requires them to register the animals, the emotional support farm animals, or any animal that's not a domesticated animal. So if it's a dog, they don't have to register it. But if it's a duck, it has to be registered within 30 days. And it's coming up with a simple application process that we can create pretty quickly. It's just a way of monitoring these throughout the community. And again, we're only working with one right now. The issue came up too, which is interesting, was we had definitions for domesticated animals. We talked about what type of animals you could be kept in a house, and based on some community feedback as well, how did you integrate, aquarium fish, turtles in an aquarium, hamsters, things of that nature? How do you integrate them with that total of 4 animals of domesticated animals? Because you could argue that a guinea pig or a hamster is a domesticated animal, and it falls into the definition. So we basically created an exemption in this proposal that, and you can see here, fish, aquatic animals, crustaceans, amphibians, reptiles, anything confined to a aquarium, terrarium, or in a bird cage, or a small mammal under 5 pounds would be exempt. So if you want to have 5 turtles, you can have 5 turtles. It's something that we're going to go after. In light of increasing the amount not increasing the amount of animals, but going for different species, we thought that it'd be prudent to maybe put some more quantifiable violation or nuisance mechanisms into the code. We actually got this from the city of Naperville. So what would happen is if police or code enforcement got caught out to a property, if it was during daytime hours, if a dog or an animal was making noise in 10 consecutive minutes or more, it'd be in violation. And during the morning hours or the night hours, between 9:01 p.m. and 6:59 p.m., anything more than 5 minutes would be considered a nuisance and would be a violation at that point. So that's something that was added in. And we just discussed that at the operations committee as well. I made reference to the number of animals for those that are on the operations committee. This is just sort of a highlight of what the other municipalities allow surrounding us. As you can see, a majority of them are 4. We have 4, 3 of one species. Aurora is 4 with 2 of one species. Batavia, Geneva is 4, like we're proposing at this point. Montgomery is 4 with 2 species, which is similar to Aurora. Naperville is 3 with no limit, and then Plainfield 5, St. Charles 3. So we basically in line with those surrounding communities. What's not being proposed tonight? In the past, we've been approached, the village has, about keeping chickens. That is not being proposed tonight. The only exemption that would be created would be allowing for farm animals, which would include a chicken through the fowl definition, but if it was an exempt animal, meaning that you'd have to have a certified note from a professional or doctor, or in the case of a service animal, some certification as well. So those are the exemptions that would be required. One thing we did not include in this either were special confinement regulations for the exempt animals, which are the service and emotional support. We didn't put anything in at this point in time. So I just wanted to go through and highlight that. Again, it's a large chapter. There is the draft ordinance in here, and we can try and answer any questions you might have.
I have some questions. On farm animals, if my emotional support animal was a cow, would you allow that? Would that be allowed within our village as well?
Actually, I figured that might come up, and yes, it would be. But again, having special exemption, having a professional's note, whether it be a psychologist, psychiatrist, or some of our counseling professional, to have that animal.
And in the case of, I don't know if this is a case, I read it somewhere, there's somebody has 6 ducks that are emotional support animals. Is that, what if they had 6 chickens for emotional, would that be permissible?
Correct.
Limited to 4.
That could create some problems.
To clarify, it would be 4, but in the case of the person with the ducks, they'd be grandfathered in because they had them prior to the
Yeah, I
ordinance
understand
change.
that part,
That's
but
what
I'm
we're
just
proposing.
thinking going forward, if you might want to put in some wordings to kind of control for certain, I know you did put dangerous animals, that's good. But what about the size? Maybe we could do something with size so we aren't inundated with horses and cows and as emotional support animals.
Right? Well, no, that was my question. You talked about no containment, so there's no specifics on containment. So if you have a cow, just can hang out in the house or out in the yard or whatever for right now, or? Is that right?
There's no specifics. I think what Mike was saying is like with chickens, when you do a backyard chickens, there's major electric and the type of housing is regulated by what we were proposing. Batavia has and St. Charles has, I believe. They actually had very specific ways that you have to build a hen house and whatnot. I think what Mike was saying is right now we're not requiring anything to be a special type of housing because a comfort animal could be almost any type of animal. So to put a provision in there for animals we don't know are going to come up, you'd have to list comfort provisions for every type of animal. So we don't have any, but this is a cow meeting. So we're talking about cows at the cow meeting. So we have the ability to do that right now. Trustee Lowry, I think you make a good point about the size of an animal. I mean, you wouldn't want 4 cows in a backyard probably.
You know, as an example, in some of the other provisions we have, I think it falls under dangerous animals. It talks about non-native animals in excess of 200 pounds. We could look at that as sort of a guideline for moving forward with farm animals, maybe put a weight exemption. We could do a little more research, but there is code establishment, and what we've currently drafted, I think it refers to dangerous animals and anything that's non-native to the United States that is in excess of 200 pounds. We could use that as a guideline as well.
Yeah.
So saying any animal are you saying any animal then of 200 pounds
You could
or
say
more?
any animal, or you could say a cumulative amount and weight, so that way you don't, if you have,
Yeah.
which would exempt 1 cow or several cows, so your cumulative weight doesn't exceed a certain amount,
Are we in
whether it be a goat.
So from the health department side of it, so just no containments. I don't know, I'm just trying to get a grasp of that. If you have a cow, whatever, walk through your house, or
Yeah, I mean,
as long as you shovel it up, or
4
whatever.
cows. I guess they could have 4 cows. I am a little concerned. I did read, just coincidentally, an odd news little article, and there was a guy that actually had an alligator approved by a professional as an emotional support animal. Not that we're going to be concerned with that, because that's a dangerous animal, and that's taken care of within what your wording here. However, I think we better put something in there about to regulate something.
yeah, I mean,
If 4 emotional support animals are the limit, just use your imagination. You could have 4 cows, 4 horses. 4.
yeah, I mean, we've had the conversation. This came up, and in all fairness, this was discussed in length at the operations committee. You know, with service animals, you've had people bringing peacocks on planes, things like that. So there really is no end to it. So it really is hard to trying to hone in on something that's reasonable. We kind of left it open, and at this point, again, it's just a cow discussion, but I just wanted to get the entire board's sense on how you want to proceed with confinement provisions, things of that nature. So I wanted the full board's opinion on that. So it's something we could definitely look into and bring back for another committee discussion or during final ordinance, but just kind of listen to feedback as what direction the board will want to go with that.
Can you explain to me the grandfather part? So like, if you're in violation prior to this,
It would just pertain to the emotional support animals. So the farm animal, you can keep a farm animal under this proposed condition. You can't right now. You cannot have farm animals.
Okay.
Under the proposed provision, if someone already has, in this case, 6 ducks, they could keep the 6 ducks as a grandfather clause.
But
Why would we allow that if they're not allowed now?
right, is that in
If
violation?
they have them in
6 ducks?
violation of our current code, why would, and we're drafting a code that actually defines it, why would we grandfather them in?
Well, it'd be grandfathered in. I'm assuming that, we could probably discuss this from a more legal perspective, and how, if the animals were to be deceased, if they were brought into compliance with code, they'd be capped at a certain amount of 4.
I think the only reason why you would consider a grandfather clause in this case is because it is from someone who had a note from an actual professional that said it was a comfort animal. If this was 6 dogs, we would treat it as if it was in our municipal code. We haven't had a comfort animal issue really come up before.
Well, I would like to see language in that code section that grandfathers them in, that says that those people still have to register their pets. Otherwise, we have no enforcement. We have no idea how many, we're talking about one person that we know of. There could be other people that have emotional support and could have 5 ferrets in their house or whatever, but those people should have to come forward, register them so that we can keep track of them. So if they die, they're not replacing them in kind and having 5 or 6 pets.
Yeah, I've already spoken with these people, and they're aware of the proposed changes and also to the registration process.
I do like, to Mike's point, the weight restrictions, but my question would be, why were farm animals even added? At some point, you have to weigh the emotional needs of the person in need versus the greater good of the community. I mean, for me, I don't think it would be appropriate, living on my little 10,000 square foot lot, to have to live next to somebody with an emotional support cow or horse or, whatever it may be. I do like the idea of a weight restriction because I think it will limit some of those more, nuisance type of animals. But why was it included?
I have a suggestion that maybe would work then. Is it possible that we can remove the definition of fowl from farm animal and just take fowl out of it? Does a farm animal have to include a duck or a chicken?
Then by eliminating it from the definition of farm animal, we're including it under some definitions. So would they be included then under the definition of
You can leave.
domesticated
We have a
animal?
definition for farm animal and we have a definition for fowl. The definition of farm animal includes the word fowl.
Right.
If we were to omit the word
Right.
fowl, would that then preclude it from?
But then what category do they fall in? Do they fall into domesticated category like cats and dogs? Or do they fall into the dangerous category? I mean, we only have, I think, 3 categories, or maybe 4. There might be a.
I guess it would only, if we allowed backyard chickens, then it might have been easier because then you could say we've already allowed that and had regulations for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. If we would have adopted the provisions allowing chickens, we wouldn't have even had the issue with the current emotional support situation.
Can
It's all
we
inclusive.
specify legally without getting in trouble, saying we're only going to allow certain types of farm animals, such as fowl or pig, and limit it at that and not include other types of farm animals?
From my reading, which isn't exhaustive, this is a developing area. I think the answer to that is yes. But, it's a developing area, so that the answer could change as time goes on.
Well, I'd be more comfortable if we just specified potbelly pigs and chicken, or, fowl. I mean, and take out the cow, sheep, and horse. So that kind of takes away your concern about having 4 cows grazing next to you.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, too, Kevin, I think the only animal we'll talk about service animals. Only 2 certified service animals are dogs and miniature horses, I believe.
Right. Those are defined by federal law, and emotional support animals really aren't defined at this point.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I just wanted to come back to Mike's observation about the alligator. We did exclude the whole list of dangerous animals, so alligators wouldn't be allowed.
Right, no, I mentioned that.
Okay,
I
all right.
understood that.
I didn't know if that was
yes,
clear or
thanks.
not.
But, no, thank you for that, but, no, I understood that and made mention
Okay.
to that. I know that we're not allowing that.
Yeah.
However, I think, I've seen farms raising bison. Is that a farm animal? A bison is think about the size of the animal.
It's excluded. It's excluded.
It's excluded, okay.
Any bear or bison. Bear, too.
Okay. Bears too, okay, good.
Well, can we eliminate roosters? Do you want a rooster sitting next to you? Even if it is an emotional support rooster. I don't want to be woken up at 5 o'clock every
I'd
morning.
need one myself.
Not emotional for the neighbor.
I think one of the easy ways to do this is if you look at G, it was mentioned right off the bat from Trustee Lowry, is if you look at, not GF, where it says any canine, and I know Mike mentioned this, it just says not native to North American, which fully grown can attain a weight excess of 200 pounds. I think you just have to remove the word not native to North America. You just have to put any non-canine animal which when fully grown attains a weight of 200 pounds or more. You just get rid of the whole native to North America line, and it applies to every single animal in the world then.
Yeah.
200-pound limit?
But that's still, I mean, you can have a small bison, I guess, up to 200 pounds.
A skinny pig.
Really skinny, yeah.
But like monkeys aren't included? I see
G says
G's, no
specifically
monkeys.
any monkey. And that's the other
Now,
thing.
why
I mean,
did
monkey,
somebody pick
gorilla,
that?
chimpanzee, or ape.
Because monkeys are somewhat popular, or I don't know. I mean,
That
I
was
just-
in the original language. That's language we didn't change, but it,
So,
could be changed.
so a lot of this, so the person that's asking for a pet, or not a pet even, I guess, support pet, they, so the doctor, they recommend a certain type of animal, or is it just up to the person? And I don't, how does that work, or what, how do we come up with all these things, or is it based on what the preference of the person is, or
We went
the
with-
doctor, or?
We went with the definition that we could find in the literature, which, you basically have to have a medical provider of some sort who's, a licensed medical provider making a determination that a particular animal is necessary for emotional support. So it's really all based upon a medical provider.
And the person, though, because of the whatever works for the person too, I guess. You know what I'm saying? If the, like duck versus
Yeah, we have,
something
so
else. So I mean, it's based on the person also.
we have a limited sample set, but I will say in this case, I'm not going to bring any specific information in, but it was specific to the person, specific to the specific species and particular animal that was mentioned.
My concern is this is going to be like the next CBD and medical marijuana, where you can pretty much get a doctor to give you a prescription for it for any reason. I think we need to be proactive and ahead of it at this point. I do like everything you've outlined in the ordinance. I do think that's a good idea about getting rid of the North America thing, but my main concern would be, the weight and the farm animals. It's coming. I mean, it's just a matter of when. I go into a lot of houses in different areas, and things people have for pets I never even would have guessed.
Yeah, there's
So
snakes,
it's only going to be a matter of time.
Well, to Trustee Cafino's point, there could be things like, maybe monkeys and chimpanzees are okay nowadays. I don't know by, today's standards, like in a house, obviously bears and bisons can be big and dangerous. So the real issue is, you can't, there's thousands of animals. So rather than list them all out, I still think one of the ways you limit it is you just simply, as Trustee Lowry pointed out, maybe just start with a weight limit, get rid of the non-native language to the North America. Then you at least have collectively, because even a dog can be almost 200 pounds. They're
Dogs are already taken care of.
right. So exactly. So dogs are already taken care of. They're allowed. That's one thing.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be perhaps like ferrets, squirrels, raccoons and little monkeys that are 5 pounds or so,
But those are feral animals, right? Aren't they covered
domesticate a
as
monkey.
feral?
Yeah, they would fall under, the way we've defined it, they would fall under a not ordinarily domesticated animal. They'd be considered feral. There are raccoons that have been domesticated, but they're not ordinarily domesticated, so they wouldn't fit. In other words, you couldn't have them under the way we've written.
Not even with a prescription for
No, not even, right.
Okay.
Because they're not a farm animal or a domesticated
because
animal.
they will sell the ferrets at the pet
I think we
stores,
should put a
right?
weight limit on on those other animals,
The only thing,
pounds or less.
the only concern I have about a weight limit is then you're opening it up to a much wider variety of species, whereas if we specify specific animals that we allow and exclude everything else, then maybe they'll go to the doctor for that animal. We can control what animals.
Do they go and say, I like to have, an armadillo, and then they say that, if that works for you,
Right. That's my point. If
versus
we,
a list of items that are okay,
Because if it's under 25 pounds, you could get an armadillo.
right, or a
Or,
porcupine
or,
or
well, that's a
something.
feral animal, but a peacock or,
Are we going to require fences for these animals?
Well, he said no containment right now, there was no,
well, but that doesn't mean we can't include it.
right, well, I agree, I mean,
You know,
I don't know,
6-foot fence, you know, horses can,
yeah.
Yeah.
Get a skinny horse under 200 pounds, or,
Yeah, I don't, my guess would be is I don't think they're not prescribing animals or types. They're basically just, maybe someone's already had an established relationship with a particular animal that is of comfort to them.
that's what I.
And that gets kind of
Right.
codified through that approval.
So with the case of the ducks,
ducks.
with the case of the-
They should be contained?
Well, they should be
They be able
confined.
to run free?
Well, just like any other domesticated animal, yeah, we could, but we can put confinement provisions in here.
There is a provision, though, that does not allow animals to run at large.
Correct.
So there's a general
Cats and
provision.
dogs,
right.
Well, even any animal.
I know, but
Yeah.
does it go beyond that?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it says any animal.
Yeah.
The question came out about the ducks in general. So the genesis of the ducks, if I'm correct, was that the person might have either grown up on a farm or was had ducks growing up. So ducks were something that she relates to and was comforted by the fact that she had had them as a pet before. So that's how the backstory, I believe, the ducks came to be. So I don't think she went to a therapist and asked for a duck, and they said, "Here's a duck."
And how are the ducks confined now? Do they live in the house? Do they live outside?
I believe they take them in occasionally, but they have pens outside that are, I've never seen them, but they're wooden boxes.
I believe so, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's foul provisions out there that, you know, like Batavia or other surrounding communities that allow that allow foul. They have confinement provisions. We could actually just look at those as guidance for something that we can put into our code as well.
I think we need to look at.
There's a lot of language out there.
Or we could, I mean, I'm sure we have something in the ordinance saying that they must stay within your own property. I mean,
Yeah, but
That would be the animal at large
Yeah.
provision that Kevin mentioned.
Basically, you can't have an animal run
you
free.
don't want chicken wire fence around, have
Correct.
them just running afoul.
chicken suddenly disappears. Because I think the other thing is, if we do this confinement, I mean, now we've got maybe a nuisance, we've got an ugly chicken coop, we've got neighbors complaining about that. I mean, I'm not going to make a big deal about that at this point.
Thank you. I mean, that's all actually good information. I can go with this, and at this point in time, I might bring it back to another committee discussion. I'm not sure if we'll go to full ordinance, but I definitely have enough to work off of right now. So thank you.
Thank you. You do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, is that it?
That's it. I think Mr. Toth feels he has enough guidance.
We got to this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, based upon operations committee discussion, we were able to get to here. So it is just kind of, this is new to everyone. It's new to myself. It's new to the village attorney, to PD. You know, as of right now, the actual animal control officer is the public works director. So that's something that also changed. So we're just kind of relearning everything right now and get everything situated. I'm mainly doing it because code enforcement oversees these types of things. So again, I think I have enough to go off of, and we'll just kind of keep building on it.
You know, quite frankly, I think that most of the rewrites here are pretty, I would call them common sense language of, you know, having officers go out there and try to determine whether or not a dog barking is excessive or not is a lot harder than actually putting a time limit to it and sitting there and listening to the dog barking and saying, okay, it's been 5 minutes, I can write a citation. So doing things like that, clearing up we've had people, I think, bring up the dogfish. Well, if you can have 4 dogs, why is it okay to have 7 fish? You know, so we clean up all the little stuff. I think the code is there, but I got to be honest with you, I might disagree a little bit with Mike. I don't know direction-wise where we're at with based on this conversation, where we're at with the emotional support animals.
So why don't we just have it approval, you know, if it's an unusual animal that doesn't fit on a category, because I'll go get a 50-pound snapping turtle and it doesn't fit under anything, and it will bite more than a dog. You know, I mean, why can we just, if for some reason it doesn't fit under a broad category,
So a
certain
case-by-case
name,
basis at
we
that
can
point?
perhaps either come up to a vote on a type of animal?
A reptile that's biting that's actually a prohibited animal.
But that might not be the right example, but Trustee Martinez, to your point, I think, I could be wrong, but it's been months ago, but when the Operations Committee discussed this last time, I want to say that case by case, that idea came up, and I don't mean to drag this conversation out longer, but we're going to be back at another cow meeting, and if it's not done right, then we're going to have to come back to another cow meeting anyway, so, you know, I'd rather us try to make our best effort before we come back again. I would suggest that line of thinking might make sense to try to limit it the best we can based on what we think is egregious, having 4 cows, something like that, bringing it back and then putting a clause in that does say that the board has the right, and that would, to look at a specific animal maybe not listed or defined properly, that would give the board also the ability, condition-wise, on whether you were going to allow, let's just call it a snapping turtle, to also say, oh, how is it going to be confined, almost like a variance, and you would have that ability to maybe look at it and say, as long as it's confined at a house, it's fine, there's no issue, you know, and you can only have one. And maybe that's something we can do in those rare cases.
I had another thought, not to prolong the conversation, I apologize for that element of this, but this individual that's grandfathered in with 6 ducks, is there some way of wording it to where, as the ducks pass away, that she adhered to the limit of 4 animals?
During the registration process, Mike was saying that that's what we would specify to that person at that time, so they're aware. And we have had situations in the past. One was with a dog situation recently where we had someone found with 4 dogs, and we had told them, one ended up, they were in violation, one passed, they let us know, hey, we still have the dog, and then when the dog passed, they let us know the dog passed, and at that point, they weren't necessarily grandfathered in, but as we were working through the violation process, one naturally passed. So at that point, they said, we're not buying another dog, we're down to 3, and that was it. So they knew they were at the limit.
Okay.
You know, I'm the only one of the whole group that grew up on a farm. And a lot of those animals, you know, belong on a farm. And there's a lot of those animals I wouldn't want to have living next door to me in town. It was one thing on a farm. You know, dogs and cats are one thing. But I think you go into some of these other things that we're really going far out. So I think they belong on a farm, and that's where they...
Well, once again, you could also look at, and I would suggest maybe under emotional support animal, you can define, excluding fowl, all other farm animals. You could say that you can keep fowl, but any other farm animal would still be, just like a dangerous animal, would not be allowed, and just call it a day.
I like that. I like the idea of specifying you can allow a pig and fowl, and all other animals that are not specifically allowed are excluded.
Well, you know,
So
rabbits are all right.
Well, but rabbits fall under a small confined
domesticated
cage
animal.
underway, anyway. And they get out sometimes because they come down to your neighbor's house and you find them in the morning.
They chew your
It does
sandals.
happen. All right, you got enough?
Yeah, I think we do now.
All right.
Which one?
That's when you proposed about eliminating, just excluding everything but.
Okay, but what about, and not bringing it back case by case, just starting with the limiting the farm animals?
Yeah.
To fowl and pig, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything, what other farm animals are there that aren't going to get to be 500 pounds?
We're allowing pig? Is that, I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
I kind of,
Miniature pigs.
yeah, pigs are they're pretty intelligent. Yeah, I think we should allow pigs.
But again, we'll have that 200-pound provision as well.
Yes.
I hope you got a neighbor that...
Yes, well,
Hot value.
Mike said what we would do is we'd also put that 200-pound limit in there too.
Yeah,
We'll get rid of that non-native to North America provision, and that'll apply to any animal, and we'll make dangerous animals and farm animals minus fowl now prohibited.
But I think there should be some language in there that says anything not specifically allowed is excluded, so that people don't try to come up with crazy peacock stories about their, emotional support, domestic peacock or whatever, or try to, if, that becomes a foul.
Sure.
Well,
So,
it's funny. I don't know how many other communities say that their cats have to be on leashes, but our ordinance says cats got to be on leash. Well, I remember 40 years ago when we had that discussion for 2 hours about whether we should have cats on leashes. So we really haven't gone very far in the last 40 years.
The cats still aren't following the law.
Anyway, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're out of here.
Say moo.
That was a fun.